So hello everybody, welcome to our Lunch and Learn program. So this happens once a month on every second Tuesday from 12 to 1 p.m. So thank you all for being here today. So first off, I would like to thank our Chairman Circle. Without our Chairman Circle, we actually wouldn't be able to do these programs for free. I would just like to thank Chapman University, CR&R, Chapman Crafted, Ricky Realty, Thompson Building Materials, Southern California Gas Company, Toyota of Orange, RJ Noble Company, Chalk, Selman Chevrolet, Quoc Vit, SA Recycling, Ray's Coca-Cola Bottling, Carefree Home Care, Embassy Suites, and Guzman and Gray's CPAs. So the agenda for today, welcome. Our featured speakers are our board member, Alisa Driscoll, and Dr. Whitney McIntyre-Miller from Chapman University. Then we're going to go into a discussion, into Q&A, and then we're going to close and tell you about our upcoming events. So some friendly reminders, this session will be recorded. We ask that during the session, please keep your mic muted. Turn on your cameras if you feel comfortable. And also throughout the whole session, if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the chat box. And finally, have fun. This is an informal session. Just have fun, be here, be present, and ask as much questions as you like. So our guest speakers are Ms. Alisa Driscoll and Dr. Whitney McIntyre-Miller. Alisa is the Interim Vice President of Community Relations at Chapman University. In this role, she works to build common ground between the university and its surrounding communities. Before assuming this position, she helped to launch Chapman's Office of Community Relations as its first Communications and Operations Manager. She's also involved in a number of DEI initiatives on Chapman's campus, including serving as the chair of the advisory group on the status of socioeconomic stratification. She was also a past co-chair of the advisory group on the status of women and LGBTQIA+, safe space trainer for faculty and staff. She's passionate about giving back to her community, and she also serves on the board of directors for both the Orange Chamber of Commerce and Mariposa Women and Family Center. She's a proud member of the Rotary Club of Orange. She earned her BA in Classical Civilization from UC Irvine and her Master's of Arts in Leadership Development from Chapman University. Whitney McIntyre-Miller is an Associate Professor of Leadership Studies at Chapman University. She centers her scholarship on peace leadership and community development and leadership. She has experience in community and international development, refugee resettlement, nonviolence, and elections monitoring. She coordinates the Master of Arts in Leadership Development program and is the co-director of Chapman's Panther Experiential Philanthropy Project. She has served as a co-convener of the International Leadership Association's Peace Leadership Affinity Group and as a Community Development Society board member. She currently serves on the Human Relations Advisory Council for the Los Alamitos Unified School District. And without further ado, I'm going to pass it on to Alisa and Whitney.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having us. It's so nice to see you all on a gloomy day here in Southern California, but Jasmine, I know you're saying you're getting snow, so we'll take gloom instead, I think. So thank you for joining us. We're really happy to have the chance to talk with you a little bit about productive dialogue and having conversations when maybe the stakes are high. I don't think it's a surprise to most folks that we're living in quite divisive times these days and often have to interact with people who think differently than we do or engage with the world in ways that are different than ours. And so we're hoping we can just give you a few tools to add to your toolkit for when you're thinking about having these conversations and hopefully feeling ready to jump into them. I mean, as much as ready as any of us can ever be to have these kind of conversations. But we hope to give you some sort of some skills today to really kind of help think through having these conversations. So Alisa is going to be our slide clicker. It's a very formal role that we are talking about here.
I'm driving.
The driver. I like slide clicker, you know, our official slide clicker.
The technical title.
So just a little bit about what we're going to be doing today so that you have a sense. We're just going to talk to you a little bit about the work we're going to do together. We're going to talk to you a little bit about dialogue. We're actually, since we do have limited time, we're only going to put you into one breakout session as opposed to two today, because we want to make sure that you can have a little bit longer of a rich conversation as opposed to two short little in and out conversations. And then we're going to give you some sort of final thoughts and takeaways that hopefully you can use in your daily life, whether it be professionally, personally, or sort of in any space that you need to engage in these kind of conversations. All right, Alisa, over to you.
Gosh, I have to drive and talk now at the same time. Okay.
I know. Why do you think I asked you to do it?
So before we get started, we wanted to just spend a little bit of time setting some norms for our session today. So we understand that this topic of having these high stakes conversations can be a bit sensitive. So we want to do our best to create an environment where people feel that they can share their own experiences safely and speak to their own personal experiences. So some common norms we try to promote in groups like these include, for example, not interrupting while someone else has the floor, remaining open to other folks' thoughts and perspectives, keeping what is said in our virtual room of sorts within the room. And not that it would happen in this crowd, but, agreeing to make no, disparaging personal remarks. Again, not that that would happen here. If there are any other norms that might be important to this group, would you mind sharing them in the chat box so we can kind of go over them? I do want to make a note and say that while we do, collectively agree to uphold these norms, confidentiality in public spaces can't be guaranteed. I know we'll be doing the breakout rooms, and my understanding is even though we're recording, it won't record the breakout room discussions. So please feel free to kind of keep that in mind while you are sharing your personal experiences today. And excuse me, Whitney, I'm going to have to rely on you to actually, if someone puts something in the chat, I can't see it. So please let me know if someone puts something in the chat.
Okay, well, we don't have anything in the chat right now, but I do recall that I completely failed to do introductions. So I did put that in the chat, but just to you. So I'm going to use this chance that you gave me the mic again to say, I completely forgot to ask you all to do some introductions. So if you wouldn't mind, just sort of, we'll have your name when you put in the chat, but if you just sort of put like where you're coming to us from, we'd really appreciate to kind of get a sense of who's here. It sounds like many of you know each other already, which is great. But a chance for me to meet you and for you to meet each other if you don't already. So your name will pop up, but sort of like where you're coming to us from today would be great so we can see it in the chat. All right, Alisa, back to you.
Thanks. Okay. So the why, truthfully, as humans, many of us have real difficulty conducting tough conversations, and we may avoid having them altogether. I know that's kind of been my personal go-to in the past. But why is that? If any of you have read Crucial Conversations, the book, I know a few of us have, you may be familiar with the fact that the authors define these conversations as situations where there are opposing opinions among the parties, where there are strong emotions present, and the conversation is high stakes. And this combination might make us feel like we're under immense pressure, right? And we can be unsure of how to best navigate a situation with all of those elements involved. And there are also a few additional factors for us to consider here. The first being, when conversations matter the most, we tend to be on our worst behavior. I mean, after all, emotions don't exactly prepare us to have the most effective conversations. So for some of us, this can be self-defeating, where we might clam up so our point doesn't get across the way we want it to. And then we end up turning resentful because we feel like we haven't been heard in the way that we have really desired to. And some of us may even make, sarcastic remarks that are not beneficial to anyone. It comes off more passive aggressive. So that's definitely something to consider. Second, we're consciously aware that failed conversations never really make us happier or better off. So we sort of dread them, right? It's a self-defeating, loop. And this is true not just within the workplace, if we're, confronting a colleague or if we have to ask for a promotion. These kinds of conversations exist in our personal lives too. So for example, if you're ending a relationship, or even asking your overbearing in-laws to quit interfering, not that I have personal experience with that. The third thing to keep in mind here is, when we get locked into this frame of mind that is referred to as the fool's choice, which essentially means you're being put in a position where you're forced to choose between how can I speak my mind and get my point across while still being respectful of the other parties involved and not ruining my relationship with them, right? And that's the holy grail, walking that fine line and being able to do both of those things. And that's really difficult. So while I won't lie to you and say there's a magical way to have these conversations effectively, there are a number of tools that you can learn and implement to set yourself up for success when you're in high stakes conversations like these. So this quote here is actually from the Crucial Conversations text. So the key skill of effective leaders, teammates, parents, and loved ones is the capacity to skillfully address emotionally and politically risky issues. And this may, not be a shock to us. In fact, it's pretty evident, but researchers have found in study after study that the key skill to effective leadership is really the capacity to do this effectively. And we hope to provide you with some resources that can tap into this during our presentation today and help you become the best you can be when it comes to having difficult conversations. And we really challenge you today to keep a few questions in the back of your head and reflect on them. Again, we'll have some opportunity to chat, have some breakout sessions, but you can probably tell from the way Whitney and I are kind of presenting today, we're very informal, really want to keep this conversational. So please feel free to jump in. But are there any maybe important conversations either at work or at home that you've been avoiding actively? And maybe, would your career take a step forward if you were able to address some of these situations more effectively? So just kind of meddle that around in your head a little bit today while we're chatting, and we'll discuss.
All right. Thank you so much, Alisa. So we're going to talk a little bit about what is dialogue and sort of when are we in dialogue or out of dialogue, as the case may be. So we just want to kind of give you a little bit of a structure here to sort of frame our conversations going forward. So what is dialogue? It is the free flow of meaning between two or more people. The free flow is a good indicator there. That we know that we are actually sort of engaging with someone and not just talking at them or being talked at. I would imagine that all of you can think of an experience where you were being talked at, maybe also where you were being the talker, but I think maybe the other way around too. But really, it's an essential skill, dialogue. It's an essential skill for when things are risky, when things are controversial, or like Alisa mentioned before too, when they are emotional. When emotions are high, that's when things really get dicey, right? So one of the things we like to talk about is sort of the importance of getting the relevant information out on the table for folks. And relevant is important because I would imagine you've also been in a conversation before where some information that might not be relevant gets thrown out at you or towards you or maybe from you as well, right? And so it's important to really sort of focus on that sort of essential information that is needed to make the conversation grow and be strong. And we know that people make better choices and make better decisions when they actually do have accurate and reliable information. So not only does it need to be relevant, we also ask folks to engage in the sharing of accurate and reliable information. So that can be tricky sometimes too, to sort of determine sort of what is true, what is fact, and what maybe has been fictionalized in some way. And of course, there's always 1, 2, 3, 50 sides of every story that we need to consider as well. So part of this requires asking questions from a place of humility. So actually desiring to know what the other person thinks and what they feel, as opposed to sort of really serving to drive home your side of the story. So this is a different way of having conversation, right? Because oftentimes when someone else is talking in our heads, we are preparing our own response to what it is that we want to say, but we're not actually listening to what the folks who are talking have to say. So rather than actually going into a conversation, going in to prove your point and prove your side of the story, we invite you to actually listen to the other folks who are talking to and understand that they have a side of the story as well. So also sort of understanding that we often in these kind of conversations get into this fight or flight or silence versus violence mode. This is not unusual, right? When we think about any sort of really high stakes environment, conversation or not, right? That fight or flight really takes in. Like, do I really want to just dive in and really drive home my point? Or do I just want to close up, stay silent, even leave, depending on sort of where you react? And trying to understand that if at all possible, we want to acknowledge that fight or flight, sort of tell yourself, okay, I hear what you're saying, body, emotions, minds. And I'm going to give myself time to actually find something in the middle here, right? So that we're not either being silent and holding on to resentment, or we're lashing out and using sort of violence in these conversations, right? So it actually is really a keen willingness to understand other people's ideas and perspectives. So when we go into a conversation, that point of being in conversation with an openness to others is really essential. And I think in a lot of ways, especially in sort of this environment, we don't necessarily do that, right? We go in to prove our point, not to really listen and to engage. And so this requires creating a safe space where people feel that they can speak their mind, they can speak their thoughts and their perspectives, and that they will be heard, right? And so that is finding a space that is comfortable for everyone to engage in. And whether that is, I mean, in the time of COVID, right, that might have to be online or on the phone in some capacity, but sort of whether that in, the times that will be coming to us eventually soon is at a local coffee shop or in your living room or wherever it is, that not just you, but the folks that you're engaged with are feeling safe. Those are the good actual physical spaces to have these kind of conversations, because a physical space where everyone feels safe allows for the sort of multi-dimensional space for you to actually have and engage these conversations. So we want you to kind of keep those things in mind as you're thinking about conversations, as we sort of have Alisa move us into sort of a dialogue about dialogue. So Alisa, back to you.
Dialogue about dialogue. So we're going to jump into breakout sessions in a little bit, but I know for me personally, I always like to take time to reflect before I get into a group session of kind of, just kind of gathering my own personal thoughts. So here are some questions on the slide that you can see. And we ask that you take a couple of minutes here to think about a time where you had a conversation where something was at risk or emotions were high and things went well. A few things that you might want to consider, who was the conversation with? What was the nature of that relationship? Were there any power dynamics involved? What feelings did you have? Did you kind of wing it? Were you prepared? How did it go? So just take a couple of minutes and make some mental notes if you feel so inclined. It looks like, and I believe we have 9 folks on the call aside from the presenters and chamber staff. So Whitney, do you think maybe we should do 3 breakout rooms? So if there's a group of 3 in each, or?
We could try 3.
Okay.
I'd say 2 to 3, depending on sort of how folks are going to be able to interact. I know that some folks maybe aren't going to be able to interact as well as others, maybe depending on what other things are going on. So yeah.
All right, well, why don't we do 2 then?
Okay.
You go for 2? All right, so I'm going to stop sharing really quick, in theory, while we send you to breakout rooms. So this is really an opportunity for you all to have a chance to chat on a smaller scale with some folks who are on this call, learn from each other's shared experiences, and really get to know some of the fellow chamber members who are on the call here. So I believe it's going to do this randomly. So there should be something that pops up that says, yes, I'll go to the breakout room. So let me do that right now. All right. There you go. Yay.
Good call, because I saw 2 people drop automatically when we said breakout rooms. So.
Oh, really?
So I was like, let's do 2, because inevitably people are not back, everyone. We hope that you enjoyed your conversations with each other. It's always a good sign when we send the notice to close the rooms and people don't just come back right away. So it means at least you were somewhat engaged in conversation. So that makes us happy. We just thought we would just take a minute or 2 here to sort of check in with you and see if anyone from either of our group would be willing to sort of share a little bit about your conversation. You don't have to include any personal details if you don't want, but just sort of a general idea of what y'all talked about.
I think we had a great conversation. Everybody shared different tools that they use, you know, whether it be finding common ground and respect for the person you're working with, trying to look for solutions and supporting that person, you know, understanding where they're coming from, and timing, meaning knowing when the right time to broach whatever subject it is, you know, the timing, how today's not a good day to talk to them. Okay, book that. So how are you feeling and whether it's a good time? And I think one that was really important was the difference between the event and the emotion and how you deal with the person. Remember, they might have done an event that triggers an emotion that you have to just be careful of. So I thought that was a really good point. And then the tone of your voice, you know, how that sets that really important part. So I think those are the overall summary of ours. We had a great dialogue and great conversation.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. How about somebody from our other group, or somebody from your group? Irma still wants to weigh in, that's fine too.
Jasmine was retweeting that. She was
I missed the retweet. Man, I feel very sad about that. You want to do it again for me, Jasmine? Now I can see you on my screen. Thank you. All right, others.
I think part of our group, we shared more personal experiences versus like work experiences. My direct example was actually more about having a dialogue to repair relationships. And the best thing that I did when I had that hard conversation was to sit with the emotion, but like also have compassion for the other individual. And if both of us have compassion for each other, we could slowly build up, like have dialogues my personal relationship was with a family member. So it went from having a strained relationship with no dialogue or very little dialogue to kind of like weekly conversations. So it's gone to the point, the great thing, it's weird to say, the great thing about this pandemic is its ability to repair relationships when you do have strained ones, because you're kind of seeing like, hey, we're in the same airspace, where we're feeling the same feelings. So talking it through and having the time to actually talk through it. I think that was one of the practices that we used. And my relationship with my family member is stronger than ever now. And it's going to be an uphill, like it's going to continue going uphill. So it's great.
That's really great. And finding that balance, I think, is so important. And so to be able to do that and to acknowledge that you're sort of sitting in that moment is really, really powerful, I think, and not easy. So being able and willing to sit sort of in those tensions and sort of hold both of them sort of constant is really, really hard work. So good job.
I really appreciate what you said too about kind of, I guess, acknowledging the fact that we're all on kind of this human level, right? Yes, we have these varied experiences, but we're all kind of in this shared space together. And I think that brings us on a level playing field in a lot of ways. If you have someone who's willing to kind of be that dialogue partner with you and is able to kind of reciprocate that talk. So really appreciated what you said.
Yeah, absolutely. Seeing each other's humanity. It seems like such a simple thing, but actually sometimes it can be one of the more complex things that we have to do in any sort of relationships we have. So I think that's a really powerful muscle to flex if we can. So it's a challenge that I give to myself, and I invite you all to do too, is that when somebody is really getting to you and like you can just sort of feel it, right? That like, oh man, this person is making me crazy, right? Like whatever it is that you're getting to, it is trying to allow yourself to pause when you feel that tense emotion and thinking about, okay, where in all of this can I find the humanity in that person, where I can link to that person despite any of the other things that are maybe sort of triggering me or making me feel really sort of tense or angry. Like, how can I find humanity in that person? And it's a good exercise I will admit that I am more successful some days than others, and I am more successful with some people than others. But it is sort of a good exercise for us all to really think about, like, how do we tap into that sort of unifying humanity when it can be sort of trying for us. So absolutely. Thank you so much. Anyone else want to share from the group? Okay, those of you who've been one of my students, you know about that long wait time, just waiting to see if maybe somebody really has something they want to say and they're not quite sure, and then they get brave enough at the very end. But we can go ahead and sort of move on to some conversation about some skills. So you've talked a little bit already about things that have worked for you and things that really connected to your way of engaging and thinking about these issues. What we're going to do now is sort of give you some other skills to augment those. And not everyone will feel at home with all of these, right? There's some that maybe will resonate with you. There's some that you can just let go. There's some that maybe fall in the middle. That's totally okay. This just gives you the space to sort of think about, how can I personally engage in some of this work in a way that feels authentic to me? So the first one of those is starting with your heart. So while we are telling you to be engaged with the other person and think about them, you also need to be aware of your own needs and desires for the conversation. So these really should be sort of outcome based, not like focusing on winning, right? Like, aha, I won this, I got the right thing that I needed, but really about sort of the relationship and the what and need as a result of this conversation, right? So kind of how you can feel and lean into that work. So the second one is focusing on the relationship, right? So again, not about winning, right? Not about being the right person with the right answer, but really sort of about maintaining or restoring, right? Or creating the relationship that you're in with the person you're in dialogue with. And so once we know what we want from our starting with our heart, what we want from this conversation, we can also then begin to understand maybe what other folks might want and what that mutual relationship can look like. So the next one really is to focus on sort of learning to assess the safety of the conversation. We talked a little bit about sort of creating a safe space, a physical space, or sort of an emotional space, but really this is important here to really allow the conversation to move forward, right? So if you have to reflect on your own self, right? Am I feeling that fight or flight piece in my chest, really, right? Am I clenching my fists, right? Whatever it is that sort of triggers you into that feeling. Also think about what's happening with the person you're in dialogue with. Are they getting incredibly quiet, or are they getting increasingly violent? Those are signs that they're not feeling safe either. So as important as it is to look at your own safety and understand your own safety, it's also important to build safety into the conversation when you believe that maybe someone else is not feeling safe. And so really part of that is trying to remember again that mutual relationship and trying to build safety back into the conversation, maybe by diffusing sort of violent behavior. Hopefully it's not actual physical violent behavior or even language violence, right? But sort of the feeling of that happening, or sort of when someone's really shutting down, that you can sort of be cognizant of that. And so it requires a lot of work, right? Because you're sort of listening, you're having a conversation, you're listening to your own body's emotions and thoughts and feelings and reactions. And then you're also trying to understand what's happening with the other person and sort of tap into that too. So there's a lot going on, right? So number 4, we talked about a little bit, right? That basic humanity piece, right? So feel like there's something, even if it's the smallest of things, that you can respect about that person and really hold on to that. And hopefully you can expand it from there, that there's actually more that you can hold on to and respect about that person. But if nothing else, find that base level of humanity and work from there. So another really interesting tip is sort of the use of contrasting. So state what you don't want in addition to what you do want, right? That you're not intending for folks to feel bad, and that's not actually what you want, but that you do want, let's say, to be taken seriously at meetings, right? Or whatever it is that this conversation is about. Sort of acknowledging that you're not necessarily out to get someone, right? That's not the point of this dialogue or this conversation. It's about sort of that benefit for you, the benefit for the relationship in a work setting or in a home setting, the benefit for the organization, the benefit of the family, right? So that next piece is really sort of separate the stories from the facts. So facts are what actually happened. Stories are what we tell ourselves about what happened, right? So it's really important to break those two apart, because it's one thing enough to sort of know what really happened, but it's another thing to realize, like, I have created a narrative in my head about why you are doing this, or why I'm feeling this way, or whatever it is, right? We create these stories. And it's really important for us to stop and to understand, like, when it is that we are talking from facts and when it is that we are talking from these stories. Stories do help us in some ways, but we have to acknowledge what the difference is. And we then also have to be aware of the other person's stories. So those of you who are Brene Brown fans, she talks a little bit about this in her Dare to Lead book, right? About sort of this notion of the narrative that you tell yourself versus what's really happening, right? When your spouse tells you to put things in the dishwasher for the 15,000th time, right? The story you can tell yourself is, wow, they think I'm terrible at everything I do, right? When really it's I'm really busy today. If you wouldn't mind helping me load the dishwasher, that'd be really great. Those are very two different stories with sort of the same issue at hand, right? So we have to be really careful about what those differences are when we talk about them. So speaking with humility is also really important, right? Understanding that there's more than one side of the story, using language that demonstrates that you understand that, taking ownership of your own thoughts and feelings, and don't assume that you know how others are feeling. Ask legitimate questions from the heart, as opposed to speaking that your perspective is the only perspective and the right perspective. And then the last tool, which is really helpful, is paraphrasing. So folks, I know people may already be familiar with this one. This one's a really sort of common way of thinking about conversations and interaction, but actually sort of paraphrasing what you've heard the other person say as a way of checking in. This is what I'm hearing you say. And then that other person has the chance to say, yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying, or saying, no, that's not what I'm saying at all. You totally misheard me. And we have been in those situations, I'm sure, before as well, where we think we know what the person is saying, but it turns out we don't actually know what they're saying, or we heard the story we wanted to hear and not what was actually being said. So that paraphrasing is a really great way to sort of check in as a tool to make sure that we know what's happening with the way that the person is meaning the conversation to go just as much as ourselves. Okay, so those are not exhaustive, but it feels very exhaustive right now, list of ways that you might be able to engage in dialogue. And then I'm going to turn it over to Alisa for some kind of last thoughts as we wrap up, because we know you all have to get on with your days as well. So Alisa, back to you.
Thanks, Whitney. We really hope that you enjoyed the session today. Just some kind of final thoughts that you'll see on the screen from us today. We hope that you've really learned about kind of the importance of dialogue to handle challenging conversations that involve risk and high emotions, the importance of commitment to safety in the relationship that you're engaged in with the person you're in dialogue with as well. Again, going back to what Whitney was saying about speaking from humility and understanding and remembering everyone's basic humanity when you're in these situations. Separating out facts from stories and starting with ourselves, right, from the heart, and then focusing on the relationship, not necessarily that win-lose dynamic. So when you get back to your work or home environments, we hope that you recognize the fight or flight syndrome as well for an important conversation. Learn to really try to implement some tools to calm yourself as you enter these conversations, but also stay true to who you are and your wants and needs for yourself and the relationship that you're involved with here. Strive to create those safe spaces, and as always, make informed collective decisions that can maintain, establish, and reinforce relationships. So these are kind of just some final thoughts from us. I know that this session is typically pretty jam-packed in terms of time. So wanted to thank you for inviting us today. I think, Connie, we typically do a Q&A. Do you want to kind of lead with that, or?
Sure. We didn't have any, we didn't have a lot of questions that came in, But if you have any questions now, feel free to share them.
And don't feel like you have to put them in the chat box. Let's just have a dialogue.
Yeah.
Well, a question I have is, it is really hard when you have those first of all, if you know you're going into a difficult conversation, your emotion within you is you're nervous, you're kind of worried, how, I know you said create that, but sometimes do you have any like breathing exercises you do? Do you just, before you go in, do you clear your thoughts? So, you're going into a discussion or to an area, speak to your boss about direction or kind of, so some tips on that.
So you want to go or you want me to go first?
It doesn't matter. Go ahead. You go first.
Okay. Well, I think one of the things, again, this is I'm going to tell you things, but don't assume that this means I'm good at it or that I do it well. But one of the things that I think that is really helpful is that if I can find a way to sort of, again, do as I say, not as I do, try to be sort of balanced on a regular basis. Like if I can, for me, I do yoga as my sort of my go-to thing. So if I can sort of create a regular space and practice, then I find that I'm automatically better in these places. But of course, as soon as the stress level goes up, right, you think your time goes down, your ability to do those things goes down. And so any sort of regular practice that you might have, if it's meditation, if it's a walk, whatever it is, kind of goes out the window. So I think the first thing I'd say is sort of trying to have a regular time where you can sort of check in with yourself emotionally automatically sets you up better. And then I would say, if you're going into the conversation, sometimes you don't know, right? Sometimes it just hits you. If you know, then do something like breathing or walking or yoga or whatever it is that relaxes you before you go into the conversation. And then in the conversation, for me, is I've worked really hard on trying to, again, do as I say, maybe not as I'm always great at doing, but sort of breathe through the emotions. And so finding a breathing pattern that works for you, I think is really important. Like for me, I just count to 2 over and over again. Breathe in 1, breathe out 2, breathe in 1, breathe out. And if I actually say it in my head. I just read this fascinating thing that some people don't actually talk to themselves in their brains. They actually just see images and photos. Maybe that's you. I have a constant conversation that's happening all the time in my head. And so if I stop myself, and then that helps me listen to someone else too, right? Because I'm not constantly sort of trying to figure out what I'm going to say next. I just breathe in 1, breathe out 2, breathe in 1, breathe out 2. It keeps me calm as much as possible. Now, sometimes that goes out the window, but it's what I try to do. Alisa, how about you?
I was just going to say, and not necessarily a kind of a self-soothing calming tool, because I need to work on that in my life. But I think one thing that's been really helpful for me, there was a tool actually, and I think Jasmine might know this, in our master's program that one of the professors provided, and it was a guide to outlining and preparing to have these important conversations. So for me, at least, the ones that don't come on, off the fly, right? You're able to sit down and look at it objectively and say, okay, these are my goals for this conversation. This is the way I want this person to feel leaving the conversation. This is how I want to feel. And I think taking the time to actually put it down in writing and prepare to have those conversations really lessens the ability or the occurrence of that fight or flight. I think that it's really helpful for me. But in my particular job, we have difficult conversations all day, every day. And they can sometimes be, a little tense. So I find that a lot of the tools that Whitney specifically talked about in terms of paraphrasing and contrasting and really respecting that basic level of humanity are things that I feel are tools that I have to implement every single day. And I think it's almost like a learning muscle, right? And so once you're able to kind of rely on those things as second nature and build them up, it allows you to have conversations where you're not as emotionally invested and can really approach things in a neutral way to solve an issue rather than placing blame or going about things in a destructive fashion. It's just my thoughts. I'll stop sharing now. I feel like we're just a small group.
I think my question was that how do you, in terms of fight or flight, how sometimes it's very crucial to have the conversation right then and there, But how, as a person, do you not just like give up or walk away just to get over that conversation? Because like, at a later date, maybe like 2 weeks later, you're in that emotional mind space, but the conversation that you needed to have, it doesn't make sense to have it then and there.
I'm curious if any of our other attendees have thoughts on that. I wonder if you can also think of it as folks who are conflict avoidant. And so these issues kind of, right, they circle around and it's like you constantly have to face them over and over again.
So I think that's probably the balance, right? Sort of like it's sort of when you think about the safe space, it's a safe space for yourself and for somebody else. And if you are not where you can physically, emotionally have a conversation, I think it's okay to say, thank you for bringing this to my attention. I was not prepared to have this conversation today. I would really like to engage with you about this, but I just need a little bit of time to process before I'm ready to have this conversation. Can we find a time in the next however long it is, not too long, couple days, maybe even, like, to have this conversation? I think it's okay to say that. I think that that's healthy to say, particularly if something's sprung on you that you aren't anticipating. But I do think there's a balance between sort of checking with yourself and knowing that you need a little bit of time to get ready, and then to actually get ready and to do it, as opposed to being like, yeah, no thanks, and just kind of like, walk away. So I think it's kind of knowing yourself, and sort of, if you do ask someone for a little bit more time, then sort of honoring the fact that you do then need to re-engage in hopefully not too long of a time. Yeah, that's my thought.
Thank you. So does anybody else have any questions? If not, I'm going to share our last slide. So these are going to be our upcoming events. Okay. So our upcoming events, so February 17th will be a Wednesday at noon, will be our next business networking group. On February 24th at 9 a.m., we will be having our eggs and issues. This will be different than our normal eggs and issues, which is normally on a Tuesday. This will also be on a Wednesday, and this will be with Supervisor Wagner. And on March 9th at 12 p.m., we're having our next Lunch and Learn. This will be with Patty Cordova, who is on our call today, and we're going to be talking about social media marketing. So this session was recorded and will be available on our website. We're also going to be sharing it on our weekly newsletter. So if you're not already on our mailing list, go to our website. You'll be able to join there. But thank you all for coming, and I hope you have a great rest of your week.
Thank you so much, everyone.